we have not had a chance to meet, my name's Keith. I'm the lead pastor here. So glad you're with us today. This is the moment on the church calendar where I would normally stand up in light of men's wing night and challenge every man in here to a personal duel to eat more wings than me as the reigning wing champion. However, I learned recently that I've been eating too many wings. So I'm going to just wear my title belt proudly. I may not be able to beat you. I'm going to probably have to keep it, right around 50 or so because I've been eating too many lately. So I hope to see you at wing night tomorrow. But here's how I discovered it. 2 weeks ago, Drew and I were hiking. No one's ever going to want to go on an adventure with me when you hear my adventures. Anyway, so we're hiking. We're in like this river gorge. Like there's this river that had cut, these beautiful cliffs, and it's awesome. And at times the path is like along the river, and at times there's boulders that you get to go over, and there's times where it kind of comes up more on a, cliff this side, cliff that side, down to the water. And we were kind of on one of those narrow parts, and we're walking, and then all of a sudden the path ends in like a massive rock. And we were relatively shortly into the trail, and I'm like, okay, what are we going to do here? And Drew kind of starts looking and goes, there's a hole in this rock. Maybe we go through it, like a cave. So, when he had to kind of duck through the first kind of little entryway, I'm like, that ain't happening. So he ducks through, and he goes, oh, no, it gets better. And he goes, oh, no, it turns. He comes back out and goes, yeah, I think we probably want to go over it. So we scale this, we'll just call it the wall of death, to the top of this thing, and we're standing on this narrow little rock, and, we can't go that way because it's an active waterfall, and it's wet and slimy. So we kind of come over here, and it's pretty much a straight drop into the river, and we're like, well, if we fall, there's at least like 8 or 9 inches of water to break the fall, so let's go this way. So, we're hanging on to like tree roots that are like, we shouldn't have done it. But we kind of climbed down this thing, and as we're like mid-climbing down, we saw people coming from the other way, and they sort of just disappeared into this rock, like the Harry Potter, where you just kind of walk through the wall, and we're like halfway down, and then we hear them over here, and we're like, well, the good news is, if we make it down this, we don't have to do this again. Apparently, it goes all the way through. So we climbed down. I don't know how we made it, but we did because we're awesome. So we get to the bottom, we get around the waterfall, we look and go, okay, apparently there's a cave here. We're good. Finish our hike, go way out. It's beautiful. We come all the way back to the cave. Hours later, tired, exhausted, sweaty, ready for the last adventure to get through this cave. And you walk in and it's okay. It's, narrow-ish, low-ish, but we fit. Till this point where it gets progressively more narrow and progressively lower. And we're like, okay, we're at least going to have to take our backpacks off, and maybe one of us will get through there to, the turn, and we don't really know what's beyond the turn, but let's get that far, and then we'll pass the packs through, and then the other one goes through. And Drew kind of, looks down and goes, I think I can make it, but I don't know if you can make it. And he goes, it was narrow. It was like, claustrophobically narrow. And he goes, the last thing I'm doing is doing this twice, like going through, waiting in that little chamber over there, and you get stuck because you're fat. So why don't you go first? Because if you can make it, then certainly I can make it, Mr. Washboard. Okay. That was it. It wasn't because he was scared or anything. It was that, yeah. So, we turn sideways, and I turn sideways, and I start, and then I'm vertically I'm touching on both sides. It's an eerie feeling when there's a rock wall right here, and you're like getting your own breath back. It's unnerving. So I'm sliding through, and then it's getting lower. So most ways that you lower oneself also widens oneself. And there's no room to widen oneself. So I bust my best ballet move. I remember my daughter doing this thing called a plie. So I'm like this, And I spread my feet out wide and just perfectly dislocate both my hips simultaneously and do one of these deals. And I start through. And I am feeling every wing I've ever eaten rubbing off on the cave wall. And I'm about here, and it's getting lower. And Drew goes, "Champ, you're not going to make it." I'm like, "I got it. I'm not going to make it." And somewhere about here, I just sort of grab me, and he just kind of pulls me out this way. Didn't make it. So we had to scale the wall of death again. Which every wing I didn't scrape off on the cave wall, I carried up and over the wall of death. But because we are both part ninja, part Spider-Man, we are here today. Praise God. That is more than just a challenge for you to come to Wing Night. It is actually an illustration as we conclude our Love Jesus series. We live in a day and time where definitions are up for grabs. Particularly in our culture, what love is up for grabs. And can I tell you, not properly understanding the way God has made this world and the way He defines things, that can get you in some really tight spots. That can find you feeling squeezed. That can find you feeling stuck, choosing to live by what you think rather than what Scripture defines, can get you in some really difficult spots. And the reality of following our own path rather than what God has laid out gets us not only in tight spots, but to undo said tight spot usually leads to a whole nother scope of peril to get back to where God had us and wanted us to be in the first place. We've been spending this series looking at God's very clear definition of what love is through the life of Jesus. And we've been looking at 1 John chapter 4, verse 9 and 10. And it says this: "This is how God showed His love among us." This is it. You want to know what love looks like? Here's how God chose to demonstrate it. He sent His one and only Son into the world that we might live through Him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. The totality of the life of Jesus is a love story, which is why we're calling it Love Jesus. Looking at His life, the fact that Jesus came in the first place, the fact that He lived, the fact that He died, the fact that He rose, and today the fact that He sent is just love after demonstrated love toward us. Let's take a look at John chapter 21 as we conclude it. Love Jesus with Jesus sent. John 21, we're going to read verse 15 to 25. And time permitting, we'll get through as much of it as possible. John 21, verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," he said, "you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Again, Jesus said, "Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you truly love me?" He answered, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said, "Take care of my sheep." The third time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, "Do you love me?" He said, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. I tell you the truth, when you were younger and dressed yourself and went where you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who's going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he asked, "Lord, what about him?" Jesus answered, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." Because of this, the rumor spread among the brothers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? This is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Verse 25, Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. It's a pretty serious statement, by the way. We see in this account, this is the third time, at least the third recorded time, that Jesus appears to this group of followers. It's a little bit after the resurrection, kind of between there and Pentecost. And 7 disciples, the text tells us in a couple earlier verses, 7 disciples are gathered by the seaside at the Sea of Tiberias. And they're kind of hanging out. The evening is coming, and Peter goes, hey, who wants to go fishing? So they all jump in a boat, they go out and they fish all night, and they don't catch anything. And as they're coming in, as daybreak's coming up, there's a stranger on the shore, and he goes, hey, if you want to catch some fish, drop your net on the other side of the boat. And they're kind of like, I think we've had an encounter similar to this, but I can't see who that is over there. So they drop their net. They pull up, the text tells us, 153 very large fish. That is an awesome fishing trip, by the way. Been deep sea fishing, I get 20, and I'm like, I'm the Grady, I'm the man. 153, one drop, boom, they pull him up. With that, Peter looks and goes, I now know that guy. He jumps off the boat, Forrest Gump style, Lieutenant Dan, and just jumps in, starts swimming to shore. He's not going to wait for any of the action. He just heads to shore. He gets there, they have a reuniting, and Jesus already has a fire built. So they start cleaning up some of the fish. They're cooking fish, they're eating, they're having a nice breakfast together, they're reconnecting. And then in that moment, after they finished and their bellies are full and relationships being reconnected, Jesus engages Peter. And he does it in front of all the people, the 7. And I think he does it for a couple reasons. Number one, so that they know that all is good between them. He doesn't pull them off privately and then they have to rely on Peter's word. They see Jesus himself do restoring work in the life of Peter. And because it's public, semi-public, it's for us as well. It's not just, well, that was between God and Peter. That is written and recorded between God and Peter in front of others for us. And they all knew, and Peter knew, and Jesus knew, that after denying him 3 times before the rooster crowed, Peter needed a little special attention. And Jesus, being awesome, gave it to him. The passage starts with this in verse 15. When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. When they had finished eating, Jesus engages them. You and I can learn a lot about how to have challenging conversations with people from this passage. He waits until they're well fed, waits until they've dried off from swimming in, waits until they're comfortable. Jesus chooses just the right moment. There's some people around, but not too many. He's not in the middle of the Target parking lot. I mean, he grabs a semi-private moment, feeds them, and what we can see in this is even though a challenging conversation has to happen, Jesus prioritizes and emphasizes and demonstrates relationship first. Let's eat together. This is the 3rd time that Jesus has appeared to Peter. And I would imagine those first time or two, even this time, at some point he knows the hammer's coming. Right? At some point he's got to be thinking, I mean, his imagination has to be worse. Right? Because he's saying, oh my gosh, at some point Jesus is going to go, dude, I'm so disappointed in you. Hey, remember I told you and you were being Mr. Big Shot? There were so many different elements he could have hung on Peter, but instead, the first time he met him, and he ate with them. The second time he met him, and he ate with them. The third time he meets up with him, he does the cooking himself. Prioritizing relationship. Oh, by the way, he does address it. But first and foremost, he just doesn't go, hey, we're good, but here's the deal. He doesn't do it the first opportunity he has. He makes sure that Peter knows, I love you, I care about you, we're still tight, I'm good. Now that we're good, now that we're well fed, now that the opportunity is proper, we're going to have to talk about this. I love too, and again, something we can learn about how to lovingly confront or lovingly challenge. I love the positive nature of the question. Simon, do you love me more than these? Not, Simon, why do you hate me so much? Not, there's no accusation. You know, Simon, why'd you blow it? You know, Simon, your motivations were such. Come on now, parents. Why aren't you trying at school? We infer so many motivations rather than going, did you actually do your best? See, the positive nature that requires me to think through and come to grips with my action. Did you really do your best on that? Was that truly your best effort? Totally different. Total different level of potential condemnation or inferring motivation than going, why didn't you try? Serves you right. I told you when you goofed off, this was going to happen. There's none of that. He focuses on relationship, and then he asks him a very positive question whereby Peter can arrive at the answer himself. Doesn't duck the issue. He just does it super well, super graciously, and he speaks to him as a friend. I love this. He doesn't embarrass Peter at all because Peter had already embarrassed himself. He doesn't add any shame to Peter in this correction because Peter was already full of shame. He comes to him as a friend, doesn't heap anything else off him, addresses what needs to be addressed in such a way that the shame and the humiliation and the embarrassment actually come off. And can I tell you, yes, we can learn from this, but not just how to confront one another. Can I tell you, this is how we should come to him. Because how often do we look and go, oh my gosh, I blew it so bad. And we come in sort of with our head down, our tails between our legs and going, you know, Jesus, I'm sort of sorry. And he's not waiting to heap shame on you. He's not waiting to add to the humiliation. He's not waiting with a, told you so. I mean, I only wrote 1,400 pages. You'd think you'd know it by now. Like, he's not waiting to do that. He's waiting to speak to you as he said he would, like a friend. I now call you my friend. He'll address it, but his primary focus in addressing it is proper relationship between us. No shame, no added humiliation, no guilt trip. We're going to talk about the truth in a very gentle relational context. Oh, and directly, because look at what he says to him. Simon, son of John, do you truly love me more than these? Let's go back to verse 15, David, if you would. Do you truly love me more than these? Interesting, more than these. What are those? The other guys. And this is one of the most gracious, when you look at the way he restores Peter, he addresses every issue that Peter had pre-Jesus. And he is making an absolute direct reference to one of the last things that Peter said to him in Matthew 26:33, where Jesus goes, Peter says, these other knuckleheads might deny you. They won't stand with you, but I would. I love you more than those guys love you. I am more devoted to you than anyone else. The pride, the comparison. And now Jesus, as a loving friend, goes, do you truly love me more than those guys love me? Like you said you did when you were running your mouth? Do we still want to play a comparison game, Peter? Do you love me more than they do? And you look at Peter's reply. Lord, you know that I love you. He drops the more than them. Peter himself, in a proper question, immediately knows he's being challenged. He's being confronted with his pride and his comparison. And he immediately goes, okay, you know. I get what you're doing. You're asking me something that you know the answer to. And we both know that I'm not doing that anymore. We both know that I've been humbled. We both know that I'm just going to love you the best I can love you, and I'm not going to worry about how other people love you. It's brilliant. Deals with that pride, deals with that sin of comparison, deals with that, I'm the holiest guy in this church. Scary place to be, by the way. Just love him and walk with him the way he reveals himself to you, to love him and walk with him. And Jesus addresses that. And then he says, do you love me? Not, all right, Peter, we all know you blew it. Are you going to serve me right now? All right, Peter, we all know you blew it. Are you going to earn your way back into my good graces? He just goes straight to relationship. There's nothing Peter any longer has to do to fix it. Oh, God, I blew it. How about if I, create a penance of my own where I'll give more, I'll serve more, I'll do a little bit and just kind of get back into your graces. All God ever offers is proper relationship. Doesn't ask him to serve, doesn't ask him to do, doesn't ask him to redouble down, commit, and super double dog dare. Nothing. Do you love me? Are we going to relate properly? And by the way, there's some really interesting things in the language. Do you love me? Jesus asks him. He uses the word agape. Same word we've been talking about through this entire series in 1 John 4:9. This is how God demonstrates his love, his agape, the kind of love that God demonstrates toward Peter and asks of Peter in this moment. Do you love me? It's the same kind of love with which he loves Peter. And he says, do you love me? Do you agape me? Do you relate to me in such a way where it has nothing to do with the quality of the object that you love? Because I love you, Peter. I agape you, and it's not about your character, your qualities, your goodness. It is about my choice because of my character, my qualities, and my goodness. That is why I choose to love you, not because there's something inherently awesome about you that's better than anything else, so you don't have to love me more than those guys. I choose to love regardless of the quality of the object of my love. Hey, Peter, do you love me that way? And then Peter goes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he doesn't answer with agape. He answers with the word called phileo. It's a brotherly type of love. It means I have an affection. I have a devotion. I'm kind of captivated by you, not based on my qualities, but based on yours. In many ways, it's the exact opposite of agape. Jesus is saying, do you love me regardless of my quality? Is there something in you that just loves and isn't looking for value? And Peter goes, Lord, you actually know. I love you because I think you're awesome. My love toward you has to do with you. Has to do with the way you've taken care of me. Has to do with the way I've seen you heal the sick. Has to do with the way you're treating me right now. It's not something in me. It's something about you as the object. And yeah, you already know that's what I love. It's a step down type of love. Jesus says, awesome. Then go feed my lambs. And then he asks him again in verse 16, if you want to put that up, David. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you truly love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Interestingly here, Jesus has taken out the more than these. You started off with Peter. Are we doing the comparison thing? You still think you're the world's coolest guy, or you want to just love me just the way we want to love? Or are you trying to strive and be more than those guys? Now he realizes when Peter goes, hey, you know I'm not doing that anymore. Good. Now that pride and comparison are out of the way, let's talk about actual love. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you? And he asks him again, agape me. Not in comparison, not more than those cats, just between you and me. Do you have the same kind of love toward me that I have for you? And he answered, yes, Lord, you know that I phileo you. You know, Lord, that I'm only right here. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Here's what he's saying. Yes, Lord, you know where the limits of my love actually lie. You know, Lord, I don't. The extent of my love is right here. And can I tell you that there is something freeing about being able to be honest with God? Jesus doesn't blast him. I didn't ask you about phileo. I'm asking you, come on, man up. He doesn't blast him. He doesn't correct him. He doesn't say, well, you better get the right religious word, or son, you better get some faith. He asks him a question. Peter says, here's my actual true limit of my devotion toward you. This is actually at this stage of my life, that's as far as I can go. And it is okay to tell God, who already knows, by the way, the current limits of our devotion to him. It's okay, and it's, I think, crucial to talk to God about our current limits of faith toward him. It's okay in our walk with him to talk about him, how far, God, we trust. He's not impressed when he knows we trust him to hear, and we go, I trust you out there. Not impressive. Because here's the deal. If we're willing to say, this is how far I trust you, I wish I could trust you more, but I trust you here. At that point of honesty, he can now tell us and properly instruct us on what it takes to grow our devotion. Now, when we go, Jesus, I only actually trust you to hear, he can now say, now that we know where that line is, let me tell you how to trust me a little bit more. Because if we want to play games that you're out here, I'll hand you stuff out there. And you'll fail, and you'll feel disappointed, and we'll have to do this whole thing over again. But if you and I can just both be honest that your love toward me is based on the fact that, I give you goodies, awesome. Because from that point, I can show you what the next step looks like. The next step looks like take care of my sheep. Do you want to move from a place of phileo toward agape? Here's how you do it, Peter. Feed my lambs and take care of my sheep. That's your next step forward. I'll explain it in greater detail after the third encounter. Verse 17. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter's hurt because Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Jesus changes the question. He said, all right, Simon, do you phileo me? He's not asking about agape anymore. He understands when Peter was real and honest and said, this is my limit. My limit is not, I love you way more than those guys in comparison. The fact is, I don't even have the capacity at this stage of the game to love you like you love me. How often do we go through life thinking, I love God more than he loves me? No, you don't. You don't. And he goes, okay, you say you phileo me. Do you actually, in fact, love me that way? Like, are you sure? Let me just double check. Is that, in fact, you love about me, that you have affection toward me, and that there's something in my quality that makes you say, I'll walk with you? It's solely based on me. Is that, in fact, Peter, what we're talking about? And then I love Peter's answer. Yeah, he's kind of hurt, but whatever. Lord, you know all things. He appeals to God's knowledge about their relationship. How often do we in the church in the U.S., not here because you guys are cool and we do real faith, real life, but in America, you ever seen Christians that look like super Christians? And you would look at them from the outside and go, well, that guy surely loves God. Man, he carries a giant Bible everywhere he goes. He prays all the time. He's got all the right holy language. And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes, we base our relationship with God on what the crowd says and observes about our relationship with God. Peter doesn't appeal to that. He doesn't go, look, Jesus, you keep asking me about love. Ask these guys. When we were out on the boat fishing, I was telling a man I really love Jesus. I sure wish Jesus would come back. He doesn't appeal to the front that he's put before other people. And oftentimes, we can think we are at some incredible agape place. Jesus wants us to get real about where we are, and he gives us a gut check. And to know whether or not we're in great standing, we turn and go, what do they say about my relationship with him? Oh, they say it's good. Oh, I'm their life group leader. Oh, I'm their pastor. Well, then it must be awesome. Don't ever appeal to your relationship with God based on what other people think about your relationship with God, and may I just be honest, what you think about your relationship with God. Because as Peter found out a couple weeks before in Matthew 26, it's real easy to deceive yourselves. It's super easy to think God and I are at a place where God and I are not. We always appeal to his knowledge. God, where am I with you? How do you see me? Tell me how close I am to you. God, bring me up to my limits of faith. God, bring me up to my limits of trust. God, take me to where my devotion with you ends. Would you show me that? Because let's be honest, my personality, I'm going to way overestimate that. You might be in a place where you're going to way underestimate that. You might be blown away when he brings you up to a bleeding edge that you did not know was there. You also might be shocked when he goes, back up a little, son. Don't base it on what other people say. Don't base it on what your heart says. Talk to him about it. Where are my limits of trusting you? And God, would you be willing to instruct me past that? Would you help me grow beyond phileo? And Jesus again says, feed my sheep. Now look at this. He restores him. He gets Peter great clarity where everybody's crystal clear that number one, Jesus loves him. Jesus is cool with their relationship. And Peter is now crystal clear on where his devotion toward Christ ends. And with that, he instructs him past it. He says, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep, which is not the same thing as feeding lambs. And now he says, feed my sheep. There is tremendous healing power in getting your eyes off yourself. Peter, I know you're stinging. I know your pride's hurt. I know you're ashamed. I know now, sitting here in front of all your buddies, that you said, I'll do things they won't, and now we're having to do things they don't. I know that feeling, but can I tell you the way of healing and the way of moving forward and the way of expanding your true love and devotion for me is to get your eyes off of yourself and to begin to feed the lambs. What are lambs? Baby sheep. Go find the small. Go find the hurting. Go find the brand new growing and do something for them. Feed them. Don't just make a meal and sit back and go, I've cooked. He doesn't ask you to cook. He asks you to feed. And there's a difference between cooking and feeding. Cook a meal, set it in front of a teenage boy, you're done. Sit down with a little lamb, a little baby whose head's wobbling, and you kind of got to go, open the airplane hangar, here we go. And between yawns of boredom, you just stick that little mashed pea thing in there that, I mean, can we be honest? Of course they don't want to eat that. I mean, would you? Grind up a buffalo wing. Oh, the kid will be like, hit me. Anyway, all right. Why don't they make nacho flavored like baby food? Why is it always stuff that you and I aren't going to eat either? Anyway, that's probably why. Somewhere there's this great galactic leftover container that takes all the school vegetables and grinds. Anyway, you didn't eat them. Somebody's got to. Baby can't argue with you. All right. Anyway, feed them. Take the time to slow down, to get into their world, to assess what they properly need for them to grow. Feed them. Then take care of my sheep. You know what sheep are? Grown-up lambs. And you know what they, in a perfect world, don't necessarily need on their own? Fed. However, they do need taken care of. We do need to have a place where we can connect with God, where we can worship, get out in grown-ups' lives, have a life group, take care of one another, bear my other's burdens. You had a baby, can I cook for you? You had somebody pass away, may I help you? Get your eyes off of you and onto other adults and connect and serve them. Oh, and by the way, in that process, sometimes you do got to feed the sheep. Like, it's okay to not just kind of take care of someone, but to go, hey, as I'm getting close to you and getting in your stuff and you're getting in my stuff, can I apply this word to you? Because I think there might be a gap. And as you start to do that, as you start to get outward, not only does it heal your own soul, look what else it does. 9 times in Peter's writings, 9 times, when he's an aged, wise, scruffy apostle, 9 times when Peter writes in all of his letters and uses the word love, guess what word he uses? Agape. Because somewhere in the process of, I kind of like what you do for me, God. Oh, you're going to empower me to go do things for lambs and sheep who sometimes bite and who sometimes don't want fed. And by the way, who I'm doing it with no intention of what I will ever get back. It creates in you a different type of love. Where now I love a lamb and a sheep, not because they're so cuddly, but because of my character choice to be a lover, regardless of the value of the object that I love. And he now moves and grows over time of being a feeder of lambs and a carer for sheep and a feeder of sheep. Over time, he starts to go, I'm starting to get it. This is how you love me. Oh my gosh, you mean when you were like going to the cross and I kind of ducked and hid from a little girl? I just had that thing happen. Wow. And guess what? I'm going to go back and try and feed him again. They're contributing nothing to me, but there's something about me that is growing in love for one another. You want to love like Jesus. You want to look like Jesus. You want to grow like Jesus. You want to take your next step. It will look like starting to love the unlovable. It will look like starting to care for people who bring nothing back to you. We as a church have 2 really cool things going on right now. I won't get in much greater detail, but we're planting a church in Birmingham, Alabama. You may or may not know this. We've been up there. We got a team that's heading to the ground. By the way, if you know anybody who lives in Birmingham, let me know. And you might go, well, why are we doing that, Pastor Keith? Because it gives us a collective ability to give, to pray, to go, to serve, to equip, to cheer on something that actually doesn't bring anything back to us. Well, Pastor Keith, shouldn't we just build our own community? Absolutely, we do that. But guess what else? We're going to go feed lambs. We're going to go take care of sheep. Doesn't minimize us, but this is an opportunity for us collectively to continue to grow when there is no direct impact back to us and we can love them. Here's another just crazy sovereign thing that happened. We have doors, as we speak, flying open in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. And everyone said, I feel the Lord sending me there. So do I. Flying open. Might seem quick, like what are we doing? We have been praying for the Caribbean for years. Years. Our first foray down there is into Cuba, and we're going now to the U.S. Virgin Islands. Well, Pastor Keith, how's that going to work? Well, because he said to go feed and to take care of and to feed. We'll go find some sheep and lambs and take care of them. Well, Pastor Keith, isn't that a potential drain on our resources? No, it's an opportunity for every one of us to expand our capacity to move from, I like this church because of what I get out of it, to, I love the world because Jesus has put me in it. To, we get to getting about. It's healing and it's growing. And it moves you from a love of God because he does great things to a love for God and the world, regardless of the value you see in it. Becomes about your character and not the loved one's character. We're going to skip ahead for time's sake. David, put up verse 25 for me, would you? Glenn, can you help me out? Look at this amazing sentence. Jesus did many other things as well. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. And it's not like God didn't know Google was coming. There ain't enough bytes and terabytes and googly bytes and to try to contain all that God did in the life and love poured out by Jesus. All the volumes, 1,000 poets writing for 1,000 years could not even begin to capture the beauty of what Jesus did in his life. No one ever came into a mess like this, willingly lived among it, lived in it, faced the same temptations, and demonstrated time and time and time again how to overcome. No one ever did. And then yielded himself to this thing that he created out of love. And then just to make sure, conquered death and rose. And sometimes we look and go, thank you, Jesus, for your love. And he's gone, but there's more. I can take your love to a whole nother level because I will engage you in the mission. He didn't just come. He didn't just live. He didn't just die. He didn't just rise. He sends us. And he empowers us. And you and I, if we will just simply take the call to go, can grow and change and transform as much or more than Peter did. He went from a gut level God, this is actually the limit of my love for you, to by the end of the days when he's writing, the only word he can think of for love is agape. Oh, and by the way, historians tell us when he was eventually died, he was crucified. And when the time came for his crucifixion, he said, I'm actually not worthy to die in the same manner that my Lord did. Turn my cross upside down. He got it. By walking with Jesus, following him, feeding lambs, feeding sheep, taking care of others, eyes off himself, eyes on Christ, and eyes on what Christ's eyes are on. If you and I will do it, by the time you meet him face to face, you'll have experienced the totality of his love letter to you. Let's pray. Jesus, thank you for your word being true. Let it go deep in our hearts and change us forever. In Jesus' name, amen. Have an awesome Sunday. See you next week.